It's another special edition of the Proshare WebTV Economy Discourse, and today we're looking at the recent Proshare Confidential Report, looking at judging IMF's position on Nigeria's economy. With me to look at this is our regular guest, Tope Babalola. Nice to have you.
Otto, thank you for having me once again. It's a pleasure.
And a wonderful report again, I must say.
Thank you.
From the report, policy over the years in Nigeria has failed to neither improve income distribution nor originally boost gross national income. Can you expatiate further on this Proshare Confidential analysis?
Well, the truth is that over time we've had growth. But what we're simply saying is that you must have a synchronization between both growth and social well-being. What we've been having is that we've been having growth even prior to the recession. But in terms of social well-being, we've not had the kind of robust social well-being.
Compared to other economies?
Yes, I have. For instance, you look at our poverty headcount is about 50% of the population. You look at multidimensional poverty, that's about 27%. Your working poor, that means the total amount of people, the total number of people who actually earn $3.99 per day, certainly just that at 73. That means we have about 73% of our labor force, which is also fall within that working poor. That's very alarming. Then you also look at the total number of Nigerians who actually live below $1.99, and we found out that about 53% of that. So
over half of our population below 1.99
per day. So that's huge. So you've seen that over those years you've been having growth, but in terms of social well-being, it has plummeted, and several factors are responsible for that. You find out that over those years you've had growth, and most of our growth has also largely been a product of oil rents. And all-induced growth.
Sectors are
yeah. And the truth is, you've found out that such growth also have not been replicated, especially in the real sector. And you find these are substantial factors which also affect it. Two is that the fiscal side normally should play what many people refer to as the angel in the house. And what do we mean by the angel in the house is that, one, the policies should achieve optimal potential, and at the same time should sustain growth via redistribution of income and on the margins of trying to reduce the elasticity of poverty. Over those years, what we have had is that we have tried to sustain growth prior to the recession. Yeah. But in terms of redistribution of income, we failed at that. In terms of also ensuring that we have achieve the necessary optimum in terms of potential, we are falling. In terms of also trying to reduce marginal elasticity of poverty, we've also fallen. So out of all that, you realize that it's only one thing. All those factors culminated together largely was responsible for where we are today. And that's why it brought up these issues of trying to get pro-poor policies. And that's what was the centerpiece of that report.
This Proshare Confidential Report supports pro-poor policies, especially those tending towards human development. This has been the narrative for the last 1 month across the country. What is the way forward in this regard? Yes,
pro-poor policies are very important, because the truth is that you have to invest one way or the other in that population. Yeah. But then the question is, how do you invest? Right? And don't forget, by 2050, they said we'll be like 450 million.
Wow. That's more like Brazilian.
So, but the debate over years have been, what are the kind of pro-poor policies? Do you want a pro-poor policy whereby it's largely dependent on consumption, like what we're seeing in Venezuela, we're seeing in places handouts, yeah. So you see also in places like even in Brazil, don't forget that pro-poor policies is what sport debt, and also ensure that your public debt to GDP is huge, and also because you are also running some of these large pro-poor policies, it also is very injurious to growth. What do I mean is that because of that, you have high levels of subsidies, especially in certain sectors, which also could also affect the reforms and even productivity, cost price distortions. But what many people have always said is that you can drive pro-poor policies by investing in human capital, because we know that when you invest in human capital and you also open up the economy for FDI, it's a combination of those two. So you have foreign direct investment, you have the human capital that can also work that can actually employ that foreign direct investment.
So we're looking at education.
Education.
And skills development.
Yeah, and skill development. And the truth is that when you also have a strong level of skill development, it also allows you to invest in R&D, research and development.
Which is an area we're not really.
Which we are not too. And you look at this country, Uruguay, under the period of President Jose Moselka. You know, he spent a lot on human development.
A very conservative president.
Very conservative. In fact, even a socialist.
Socialist. I mean, when you look at his life, you wonder what kind of president.
He was a Marxist guerrilla for a very long time. But you know, but when he came in, he brought this policy of what we call it a hand-in-hand economics, whereby social well-being and also growth should come together side by side. But what he did different was that he invested highly on human development and also ensured that you have paid a lot of emphasis, especially on early education. You know, that's also very key. And what were the results? The result
in the out of school issue that you discussed in the report.
Yes.
Primary school dropout issue.
So you know those are very important issues. And what did it do is that it reduced the inequality in terms of age there. That is key. Two is that it also improved gender equality, because the more you have women in school, the more women, it also increases your labor force and also reduces poverty. Now, thirdly is that when you have huge, the higher level of your education, it also increases the room for your formal sector. And what am I saying? You look at Uruguay over time, because of those huge investments they did in human development, it led to an accretion in terms of growth for their renewable sector. Don't forget that today now, Uruguay exports renewable energy to places like Argentina.
Even Brazil?
And Peru, yeah. And secondly is that because of that huge investment, it also helped softwares. Don't forget, it's now the software hub of South America.
Where Brazil and
yes, so it's the software hub, especially for startups in South America. So you can see the combination in that. That does not mean that it didn't provide for the most vulnerable, because it will always be there. But the emphasis was on human development. And because that emphasis was on human development, and it also was still an open economy. You know, what you have
Even though he was a Marxist in orientation, but he adopted that kind of open...
So open economy. So you have an open economy which supports foreign direct investment, which now, what it does now is that it provides more private capital. That's one. Two is that now, because you have the kind of investments you have on human capital, what it does is that it improves your production possibility. So that's what we are saying, is that you have to open up your economy, further open up your economy. And secondly is that you also have to, what you do is that you invest more on human capital. So those are the two balances that actually works.
And Nigeria needs to be a productive economy.
Yeah, Nigeria have to be.
That is the... I think maybe our government may have to look at that Uruguay model too. Because the ERGP, the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, the Industry, Trade and Investment Ministers, they're looking at capturing $24 billion private capital investments.
And
it must.
Yeah. And the truth about it is, one of the problems we've had in terms of social well-being is that there's a disjoint in terms of budget cycles and our developmental policy. You find that over time, in actual budget cycles, you now look at it in terms of our developmental strategy, there's a complete disconnect.
There's a sequence of planning and then
aligning together. So if you had more, if you look at in terms of developmental strategies, most of our developmental strategy, one would say that it's a B+. But because in terms of actualization of budget cycles, it has always made it very far off from our developmental strategy. So the reality is that we have not been able to achieve or ensure strong qualitative growth in terms of our budget cycles. In terms, even though you have quantitative and everything, but qualitative have been very poor. So if we can get that and also synchronize it with our developmental strategy, it will go a long way in solving our social well-being as a nation.
This study highlights the erosion in Human Development Index in Nigeria, which is a concern for a population that is now heading to 200 million. You call for an opening up of the economy. Are you saying at this point the economy is not open?
First of all, is that an opening economy is always a work in progress.
Okay.
Because the truth about it is that when you're opening up economy, you want to boost your competitiveness. Yes. Because you're always trying to boost your competitiveness. Now let's go back to Uruguay. You look at Uruguay. Uruguay as an economy, it's the number one destination in terms of investment
In South America?
In South America.
He beating Brazil.
Beating Brazil.
Even with Mauricio Macri and his pro-capital
So number two is that we look at it in terms of democracy, in terms of issues like democracy, it's policy certainty. These are also fundamental issues that also support opening up an economy.
Yeah.
Because the truth is that opening up an economy is also a precondition to growth.
Very important.
And if you look at a country like ours, and we're having crawling pegs, the truth is what a crawling peg does is that it provides you a point of entry. But it does not provide you a robust plan in terms of exchange rate. And as much as, yes, you have a point of entry, you don't have a robust framework in terms of exchange rates. It will also affect your FDI. Then secondly is that you also have to look at your competitiveness. Yes, the ease of doing business will have gone up. But then you look at...
The ease of doing business, well, competitiveness is still...
It's still part of it. But you look at the time you have to register a property. That's also a problem. You look at issues like light. And secondly is that one of the things you also look at when you are trying to also solve issues that boils down to poverty is that the monetary policy, what they do is that they also try to use exchange rate in terms of trying to help boost economies, exports, especially for like labor-intensive sectors like agriculture. Let's not forget that was one of the things that also helped to drive China.
I just was going to that.
Drive China
and US Fed.
Yes, but those also work in an avenue when you have both your forward and backward linkages. What do we mean by forward and backward linkages? Is that you have the right infrastructure. Now, Nigeria does not have that right kind of infrastructure.
Well, the last 3 years, our budget has been 30% capex to kind of infrastructure.
But then, in actuality, how much of that to GDP?
Yeah, that's a very key issue. But at least some level of...
And let's not also fool ourselves. You look at your infrastructure to GDP, GDP stock is just 21%.
Which at least, what is the acceptable percentage? 50, 60?
Well, many say it's 40.
40.
But it's one of the things that some of these things are economy specific.
Yeah.
We must be careful with when you want to use thresholds.
Yeah,
so that is, and thirdly, it's that you also look at an economy like ours, whereby your gross capital formation to GDP is just 15%.
I've always been highlighting it because that is a major challenge.
So, and the gross capital formation of any economy also highlights even the degree of openness of your economy.
From the monetary policy side to even fiscal.
To fiscal policy, and look at we've always talked about this PPP, and you have to have the right framework, the right framework for PPP. Public-private partnership, because the truth is that those are the kind of folks that want to really invest, especially on infrastructure. We are coming to terms that in terms of fiscal capacity, our fiscal capacity as a nation have been largely diminished. Yeah. So we really need private entry into some of those places. So you need the right mix of policy in terms of exchange rate that also helps PPP. You also need to drive gross capital formation. Those are factors that also help to open up your economy.
The International Monetary Fund just released its report and analysis on global economy and is warning on the risk of high debts, external debts, and that concerns Nigeria too. What's your take in this regard?
First of all, our present external debt to GNI is 4%. Many will argue that it's still low. But you have to take into consideration for a country whereby major export concentration is 75%. Largely depends on oil. So that means what you are simply saying is that your debt to GNI is also, it could also accelerate quickly, especially if you have this negative bandwagon effects on oil, which also feeds into your exchange rate. So in terms of exchange rate borrowing, it also has this effect. But I think what the IMF was also saying is that you have a scenario whereby your debt servicing is huge. At some point in time, we have to come to terms that we have to prioritize our spending. What this particular administration have been doing is that they have been trying to look at it from the revenue side. But then they're also not looking at it at the other end that at some time you have to carry out some fiscal retrenchment. Thank you, Tope. It's been nice discussing this Proshare Confidential, looking at judging IMF's position on Nigeria's economy. Hope to have you in another discourse again. That will be all for this special edition of the Proshare WebTV Economy Discourse on Proshare Confidential Reports. I remain your host, Ottoabasi Abasiekong. Till next edition, do have a lovely day.